can't carry that movie up a mountain on your own back. You need everybody else's help.
And that's one thing you want is people to become passive. Just, yes, whatever you want, you know, because you want to be challenged. And
yes. Yeah, and you need to encourage the people around you to feel comfortable pushing back so that it's not just, you know, a top-down tyrannical system. It sounds like that would work, and it's kind of this myth of the auteur that was created, I guess, you know, post-World War II French concept
by critics.
What's that?
By critics.
By critics. By critics, yeah. But it's, you know, it's a highly collaborative process, and yet at the same time, you still have to manifest that single-point leadership. So it's almost like you have to be doing both simultaneously. You've got to encourage people to be creative, and that applies if you're on the technical side of filming. That applies to your engineers and your software coders and your animators and everything else. You've got to encourage creativity at every level, and then know as a filmmaker that you're going to be the final arbiter. There might be equally good appearing ideas, but one will be better for the film in terms of the way the story is being told. And there's no right or wrong. Ultimately, a lot of it is just instinct. And it's difficult to justify instinct. But the more you can just talk and just tell people why you're making a decision, the more it helps them. The more they can process when you're not there. You know, so I just talk. You know, I just say, okay, guys, here's what I'm thinking here, and I'm weighing this, and I'm kind of torn, but this is starting to speak a little bit more to me, and it's just talk all day long. And I find that the more I do that, the better and stronger the team gets. Because they're not there to try to steal your movie from you. They're there to try to make the movie the best that it can be. Because by that point, everybody's invested in it. Nobody wants to feel like they just wasted the last 6 months of their lives working on some, you know, dog movie. They want it to be the best that it can be. And they want their part of it to be something that they can look at 10 years later on DVD and say, I did that part. That's my part right there. Mom, my part's on.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's such a long process and it's so time consuming that when you're working, doing animations, renderings, the poor guys, they spend ages doing an amazing job. But then sometimes you arrive and you realize that you need adjustments. And you have to see the faces of these guys when you're telling them that you need to do adjustments, because that means that a lot of the work that they did, they have to go from scratch, and it's going to be long. And as you say, it requires for them to have an enthusiasm and understanding why that adjustment you're doing is important to make the difference, I think.
Yeah, and look, you know, it's easy to say as a director, speaking kind of in an internal monologue, you don't have to justify yourself to anybody. But the reality is, it's better if you do. It's not defensive, it's not weak. If you can tell people why you believe it's important to make the change that is going to cost them work, they'll believe in you, and they'll do it happily, or at least they won't, you know, they won't start to lose faith in the project.
Or if they think that you know what you're doing, but I don't understand why people think I would know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But you know, I have a little anecdote about that. Is that I learned that if I get away with things, it's because of my lousy English. People do what they think I said, not what I said.
Sometimes it works.
It works perfect.
You remember when you said, and then you're thinking, I didn't say that, but this looks really good. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I was looking for.
That's the key for me.
Yeah. Well, I know this is about the role of technology in film, and I think it's probably a good thing, because we both believe this, to point out that you don't have to have a degree in engineering to make a movie in the 21st century. What you need is some actors and a camera and a good crew, and that hasn't changed for 100 years.
Not only that, there's something that has changed, because growing up in Mexico, I'm sure that you grew up in Canada, and it's this thing that in my generation in Mexico, making a film was something that was so unattainable, so far away, so difficult, so expensive. It was like a white elephant that it was impossible to find. And right now, the new generation, there's no excuse. I mean, they own cameras, that with those cameras they can make films. You know, they have editing systems. They don't need to go to film schools or anything. The new generation, because of the behind-the-scenes stuff, they know whatever a film school has to teach you. Now they have applications that they do visual effects that you wish you had 20 years ago.
Yeah. And so the tools have been much more democratized. You can get into, you know, professional grade filmmaking almost instantaneously. So, you know, in a way it's easier, and in a way it's harder, because now it's all just shades of gray on a continuum between where you start and when you wind up commanding more resources, working, you know, at a global level, let's say. But I mean, I think you and I had similar backgrounds in that we grew up far from Hollywood, you know, just kind of mentally more than anything. And so we thought that it was this amazing thing to get to work on a movie. So when I got to work on my first Roger Corman film, I didn't tell them that I would have happily paid them for the opportunity.
Is that the one they fired you from?
Well, they fired me twice, but I still came back. Yeah, Roger Corman fired me twice, but he couldn't get rid of me that easily. Somebody else just hired me back because they knew that they needed what I was doing.
Actually, that's an interesting story, your story in this sense, because I think a lot of people can relate. Being Mexican, you being completely out of the system, from a completely different country, different culture. So how was the process of you going from being in Canada, working with Corman, and then from Corman, doing Terminator?
Well, Corman to Terminator was actually a fairly quick leap. I had a bad, I mean, I worked for Corman, and the thing about that time, and I don't think it really...
Yeah, before Corman, how did you get
Corman,
to that?
I had an idea of film. I was working as a machinist, then I worked as a school bus mechanic. I worked as a precision tool and die maker. I worked as a truck driver. It was all blue-collar jobs. I was going to college studying astronomy, and then I switched to an English major because my math wasn't good enough. I knew I was never going to make it as a scientist. I thought I better switch to something I know I can do, which is tell stories. So now I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll be a writer. I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. And in my mid-20s, I started to set my sights on being a filmmaker. And the thing that inspired me was actually seeing Star Wars. So that must have been 1977. So I would have been, 23, 24, something like that. And I wanted to do that. I'd had pictures like that in my head my whole life. And somebody put them on the screen, so I knew it could be done. And from that moment on, I wanted to be a movie maker, but I didn't want to, I wanted to do that kind of film. So that set me down a technical path right there. So my version of film school, I was talking to you about this before, my version of film school was to go to USC, except I never enrolled. What I'd do is I'd work as a truck driver during the week, and then on Saturday, I'd go to the library at University of Southern California, which has an excellent film department, and I'd go through their film library. Not watching the films. I'd read the papers on how films were made. I'd read the scripts. I'd read the technical dissertations on how optical printing was done, how lenses worked, how film sensitometry worked. I mean, I literally was doing like a postgraduate degree in film technology for free. Now, the USC guys hate this story, but it actually wasn't for free. It was the cost of the Xeroxing to photocopy every single thing I read, and I created my own technical library. And so while I was driving a truck, I was thinking about how to do these visual effects. And then one day I just quit my truck driving job, and my wife at the time, who was a waitress, freaked out, and I said, honey, I'm going to be a film director. And I started making a film. And it was a technical film with a lot of visual effects in it. And that film, even though it was a piece of garbage, it landed, I learned a lot from it. It was very short. I only worked on it for a few months. That's what got me my job working on a Roger Corman film.
And which were the visual effects that you were doing in that shit? What kind of visual effects were those?
And physical animation, Ray Harryhausen style stop motion animation, but of machines, which we eventually used later in Terminator. Rear projection, front screen projection, matte paintings done on glass, rotoscoping, in-camera bipack. It was like